Right, I'll go from here. Good morning to all you guys in Facebook land. I'm delighted to be here from Inclusion Ireland. I'm delighted to have the invite from Daughters of Charity to have a brief conversation with you this morning around New Directions. And I suppose some of the opportunities that exist within New Directions in services and maybe within other options that exist within your community. So Shane, we're delighted to be here and invited along by the Daughters of Charity. And just to acknowledge that we're lucky in Inclusion Ireland, we get a little bit of funding to do this through the scheme to support national organisations from the Government of Ireland. Just to acknowledge that as well. Look, I suppose I'm going to start with the elephant in the room. There is a lot of worry among the school leavers in 2020 in terms of what's happening. You know, everybody's aware that services are shut at the moment, and you know, it's a real issue and worry for A, school leavers, and B, their families. You know, what's happening come September. I suppose at the moment, conversations we've had with the HSE are that they're planning for 1,200 new placements in 2020, meet the need of school leavers and folks that are coming to the rehabilitative training programs. They come to an end after 3 to 4 years. So between both sets, there's going to be 1,500 new placements, and 1,200 of those are new. Rest of 2020, government have allocated a budget of 12.5 million towards that. I think it's just over 20 million in a whole year. So one other thing as well, just to note, sorry, I'll come back to the demonstration projects in a second, but as we speak, current public health guidance is saying to the HSE, you know, there's a 2 metre social distancing rule. Now, at the moment, that looks like it will see a reduced amount of support for people. So ordinarily, people would have went in on a 5-day, 30-hour week. Public health guidance stands at the moment. Now, you might see that being reduced for the initial period by HSE and various service providers until those guidelines are relaxed a little. And look, hopefully by September they will be relaxed. But as we understand it, the HSE and service provider are continuing to meet people in a virtual manner, you know, to discuss terms of support that will be available to them from September onwards. I would suggest to you though that if nobody's been in contact with you, I always say to people, be proactive, get in contact. You know, there's an old phrase in Ireland, the squeaky wheel gets the oil and all of that kind of thing. So just in case, you know, somebody has forgotten to give you a call, get out and make sure, call your local provider or HSE disability manager to ensure there is some provision there for you. One other thing just to note, and we'll come back to it in a little bit as well, is that there are demonstration projects at the moment for personal budgets. Now we'll talk about a personal budget in a little bit and what it does. I suppose it gives people a little bit more control over how their budget for a day service is spent. That project is underway at the moment. So if it's something you're interested in, you know, we'll talk about that in a little bit and how you get how you register your interest for that. I suppose simple guidance, and I know that, look, we're now in June, but you know, there are probably some people on here whose family member may not be leaving school until next year. I always say to people, you know, if you're coming to the last year or even the second last year in school, you know, if your family member is going to require access to a HSE funded day service, make sure they're being included in the HSE count and they're in the plans. Don't always assume it's happening. I'll give you an example. My own son attended a special school from 4 years of age until 18. When we hadn't heard anything from the HSE come November of the year he was leaving school, it simply wasn't on their books, despite the fact that he was receiving therapeutic inputs from them. and so forth. So never assume you're on the books. And I always say, look, contact the local HSE disability manager, or they might put you in contact with a guidance service. Look, in advance of leaving school, it's always worth, contacting local service providers. A lot of them, not all, but some of them will allow your family member to go down and sample what to do, maybe for a day or two to see if they like it. So, like, if we're thinking of North Dublin, although most services take people on a geographical area and according to disability and all of that stuff, there's quite often a choice. If I think of North Dublin, for example, you've got Daughters of Charity, Geel Autism Services are even expanded in there, autism initiatives, there's Michael's House, there's Rehab, there's National Learning Network, there's the Central Remedial Clinic, there's a whole host of ability supported programs through the Department of Employment Affairs and Social Protection. So there is a wide range out there. So it's always good to sample and see what's suiting your family member. But while it seems like there's a huge choice there, quite often it can narrow down depending on your catchment area and the type of ability your family member has. So for example, Daughters of Charity would be mainly intellectual disability, CRC mainly physical, intellectual, and some initiatives in the autism sphere. But it is good to see what options are out there. I always say to people, when you're talking to disability service provider, ensure that as your family member is engaging, that the service being provided, it's a person-centred service. In other words, it's in line with new directions. We hear the words person-centred being bandied around quite a bit, but essentially what it boils down to is it's a picture of what the person wants in life and how they're going to be supported to achieve that. And we'll talk about that in a little bit more detail just when we get into the new directions. So I touched there slightly on the COVID-19 impact, but as I was saying, services are still planning for the intake in September. As I indicated, it's likely to be reduced in number, but we simply don't know what's happening. At the moment, we're looking at bars and hairdressers and shopping opened up ahead of schedule. So there are some things happening ahead of schedule, and hopefully disability services will fall into that category. But one of the difficulties is if you think of, and I'll use the Daughters of Charity as the example because we're on the Facebook page. Daughters of Charity would have a very large residential service. The Department of Health and HSE directed a lot of service providers who have residential services that employees in services were to support residential services. The COVID-19 period had passed over, and at the minute we're still in that phase, so we need to see the redeployment of those folks back to enable as many people to access day services as is possible. And then the other big issue is service buildings. So quite a lot of day services, even with new directions being in place, are still congregated where you might have 20, 30, 40, even 50 people going to one service location. Be quite a lot of the newer locations are smaller in size, still not huge buildings, and public health, social distancing might be an issue in some of them. So I know that we've met with the Minister in Inclusion Ireland, and we've asked that the fund be made available to allow providers to rent out temporary premises on public health pieces passed over. And the last thing is, it may see some service delivered in slightly different modes. We're aware that over the COVID-19 period, some service providers have continued to provide a service in, let's call it a virtual manner, through literally what we're doing right now, through Zoom and so forth. They've done fitness classes, cookery classes, virtual social get-together over social media. Now, while we say that service might be delivered through that, it is also has to be acknowledged there's a very large cohort of people whose intellectual disability doesn't, because of the level of their intellectual disability, they don't have the capacity to engage in that type of service. So those guys should be seeing more of the face-to-face support. So look, just looking at new directions and going backwards, it's always sometimes interesting to go backwards and see where you've come from. Even if we go even slightly further back from the National Disability Strategy of 2004, that disability strategy came out of Commission on the Status of People with Disabilities, which met over a 2-year period in the mid-90s. And part of that was there was an acknowledgement that day services perhaps weren't rights-based and perhaps weren't doing as much as they could for people with disabilities who attended them. So forward on a number of years, there was a national disability strategy, and part of that strategy, there was the legislative pillar, and then there were, there were strategy statements for each relevant government departments. But part of that was a national review of HSE-funded adult day services, and also in terms of sheltered services. So look, just like what was found in some of those was, we'd say, for example, in the sheltered services, there were quite a lot of, and again, this is back in the mid-2000s, quite a lot of service providers, and they were providing work-like opportunities for people with disabilities. So when we say work-like, people were going in and they were doing a day's work, but they were only getting a disability allowance. So there was perhaps some, there were definitely legal issues around the status of people as employees or trainees, because often people had been in position for 10 years or more. There was then a review of HSE-funded day services, quite a significant review, lots of focus groups, people with intellectual disabilities, lots of site visits, lots of service providers being involved in it and all that. And like, I suppose what they found at what they found in that review, and it's the New Directions report, it's easily accessible online, was that while there was some really, really good innovative practice out there and linking people in with jobs and education, or depending on their need, linking them in with a meaningful form of day support, day care, or whatever the case may be. But there was also significant amounts of poor practice going on, where people were going into services for many years, often decades, and little or no progression, little or any choice in what went on. And there was significant investment in it. So New Directions, which we talk about, made significant recommendations on how services should be delivered, for I suppose to allow people with intellectual disabilities get the most from the support as they possibly could. Now, that said, we're still in the transition phase of implementing New Directions, because the amount of funding that has been made available to implement it has been quite low, which means that service providers, while they're able to go so far to a certain amount, there is also funding implications around staffing levels, around having smaller service locations located within communities rather than the big centre, the campus setting. Just staying in the background, as most people are aware, in the last year or so, or just more than that, Ireland belatedly ratified, it's the 06 Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities, so it's a typo there, excuse me for that. We have ratified that, but what the UN Convention would say to, to states such as Ireland, we need to view people with disabilities in a different way. The traditional model dating back well more than 100 years is that people with disabilities are receivers of charity, and there's a medical condition, there needs to be social protection and all that. So what the convention essentially is saying, look, we need to view people with disabilities, people with rights holders, people capable of claiming those rights the convention bestows upon them, people capable of making decisions in their own lives, based on informed consent, and also them being active members of society. And if we just go to the second point there, it's uh, you know many people with intellectual disabilities certainly have capacity issues around informed consent, but have an assisted decision making act that's on the books. It's passed into law. It just hasn't been fully commenced and financed yet to enable people to be supported around that decision making, or in some rare circumstances where a person's disability is so great, they might need representative decision making. That is on the books, and it comes from it comes from a principled place where this capacity to make decisions is assumed to be there unless proven otherwise. But that's something that, look, when the government, our future government parties get their acts together and agree on that programme for government, we can get a bit of movement on decision making, because it's an integral part of the convention. Even say the beating heart of it. Look, this is the New Directions report. If you were looking to get more information on it, I know on our own website we've got a fact sheet on it. It's pretty, it's plain English, and it's really need to know. But if you want to know a lot more detail, the New Directions report is easily accessible online. I can't remember the exact number, but it goes to well over 100 pages, so there's lots of detail in there. What they found back at the time was, as indicated already, these services really diverse, some really great provision, and some not so great, as we've already said. They also found there was no national defined service, the wide variations in quality and funding. Some service providers were, I'll make up a number and say getting, let's say, 10 grand to support people, and another service provider down the road might be getting 15 grand to support somebody with a similar level of support. So there was a lot of variance there. There was an absence of choice indicated, and they were spending a lot of time sitting around doing, either menial, repetitive, or tasks that they didn't like. And there was a significant spend, I think at the time, the spend on adult day services in and around the 300 million mark, most of which, and this is most of which spent on staff support. I think that number is up closer to about £500 million at this stage in 2020. So look, New Directions, they made, it really, the essence of it boiled down into these 12 supports that, they wanted to see people be able to have from a service that they engage with. And like, you can see the first one there, it's fundamental. People making choices and plans, and when we say people making choices and plans, people with the highest support needs, that's a family member who knows them well, being able to say, look, Mark, I'll just use my own name, I know from supporting Mark all his life, and he's grown up with me, etc., etc. I know that these are his likes and his wants, a lot of his wants and his needs. If a person's unable to engage, but a person's able to engage, they've been able to put forward their choices and goals in life. And there are some really good tools that service providers use to engage in this whole person-centered planning piece. There was also people needed support for making transitions and progressions. Some people want to engage in maybe education. They may want to move on to a different type of service. Inclusion in your local community, and this was a significant piece, because at that stage in 08, 09, when the audit was being done of services, a lot of day services were still congregated and on large campuses, many of them away from the community, and very rarely, if ever, engaged with the community. Some did, but a lot didn't. So, it's really knitting people into their communities, is what New Directions is all about. And there's a subsequent document on day service locations, and it talks about smaller hubs located in communities. So let's say if we use the example of the Daughters of Charity, that I know that some of the stuff they've doing is starting to move people from the Navan Road right over a period of time and get smaller hubs that are located in communities. They may be in community centres, they may be a small office building located in the community, family resort centres. These are all places that are part of communities that services have started to locate their day service provision in. And there was supports, to allow people to access education, and the education sector is still doing a bit of catch up in that. But I'll talk about that in a little bit as well, some of the educational pieces that are available. The maximising of independence, because of the way day services and because of, I suppose, how we historically viewed people, especially people with intellectual disabilities, that they needed to be minded. And quite often their independence was stymied because of that. So, New Direction says, we need to be bold and push that boundary to maximise independence. And coupled with that, the personal and social development thing, then ensuring people are healthy and that their mental well-being is in a good state. Accessing bridging programs, vocational training. We'll talk a little bit about vocational training in a moment as well. And then, some people want to work. Now, obviously, for a lot of people, their level of disability is the biggest barrier to taking up employment. But in a survey by the Department of Social Protection a number of years back, I think about 1/3 of people on disability allowance said they wanted support to work. They wanted to take some sort of a job, which is a good thing, because if there's one thing we know about people with disabilities, they are 4 times more likely to experience poverty than the general population. So getting a job is always a good way out of poverty. There's supports around that. And that often leads to conflict with the HSE, because the HSE will say we support health-related services and not job-related services. So there's often conflict. People also wanted to engage in personal expression and creative activities, meaningful social roles, and and to be able to influence the service that they attend in terms of services that they experience and the policies. And just on meaningful social roles, it's there's a whole school of theory around social roles. But if I was to boil it down into something very short, what I'd say about meaningful social roles are, if you're a member, if you really like art, you might become a member of your local art club. I'm a club. I love running. I'm a member of my local running club, and I'm a member of my local park run. They're very important things to me. Actually, my son, who has an intellectual disability, also comes to our park run. I have a colleague with an intellectual disability go to park run. They're meaningful social roles. Having a job for some people, meaningful social role. And it really depends what your interest in life is and where your capabilities are. Social roles will be. So look, for people using a disability service, some of the persons in the planning might, it might look at some of these outcomes for people. Is the person living in their own home? Now, look, I know a lot of people are going to scoff when they see that as one of the outcomes, because getting residential support for the last 10 or so years has been nigh on impossible. But it is a personal outcome measure. One you would judge it's one that you would maybe judge your own life experiences on. So it's the same for disabilities. Is the person able to exercise choice and control in their everyday life? Are they participating in social and civic life? They have meaningful personal relationships. That could be with other folks with disabilities, or it could be with other folks without disabilities. Have they got meaningful relationships? Have the opportunities for personal development and fulfillment of their aspirations. So, as we said, going back to the New Direction goals, one thing about having aspirations, but are you being supported to actually achieve those. So, if you want to achieve, if you want to get employment, is your service provider supporting you to do that? Even if you've simply got a goal in life to access your community more than you are at the moment, are you being supported to do that? Has the person got a job or valued social role of some type? Are they enjoying a good quality of life and well-being? Are you in good physical health? Are you in good mental health? Um, and are you safe and free from abuse? And while that's number 9, it's always a very important point, and it's a very, it's a very important marker for all of us. And um, just to quickly touch on this, and I won't spend too long here, but there are standards to day services, and I know that's a slightly blurry diagram. Again, look, they're on the HSE's webpage on New Directions. They're only they're interim standards, but they were formally accepted. But as you can see there, they're based loosely on HICWA standards. Now, the only thing about it is, for disability services that are engaging with these, they're self-inspecting. We don't inspect them, I suppose, is what I'm trying to say, or no outside agency. So, while they are there, I've done a little bit of study in human rights, and they always say about rights standards been very, let's just say they're useless unless somebody's inspecting them and legal backup to inspect them, But then, look, they're there, and if you ever have an issue, with a service going down the line, it may be in respect of person-centred planning or whatever it may be. There are standards there that maybe you could hold them to account, albeit there is no inspection regime against them. As we're saying, I love this little cartoon, and it kind of indicates how services used to be, and some still are, and maybe should be moving away from, in that, you might come to the door of a service with your hopes and aspirations, and you say, well, look, but this is what we do. We only offer this, this, and this. You've got your goals and aspirations, but this is the kind of stuff that we support. Maybe we don't support people to go to further education and training. Maybe we don't support people to access jobs, or maybe we do. So, when you're engaging in a service, ensure that you want to engage are there. And what I would say is that, while there is some of the more traditional stuff is still rooted in this area, a lot of the newer developments, and especially for school leavers, young people leaving school now, the agency will say that any service being provided to a new school leaver must be in line with New Directions. So, ensure your voice and your choice is in there when your person-centred plan has been developed. So look, and this is just coming towards the end of New Directions. It's reasonable. These are reasonable expectations from your support. Your support will be met with on your day-to-day needs. Support that respects your preferences and your individual routines, opportunities to achieve your goals in life, and the service will work to find ways to overcome those obstacles. So if there's an obstacle there, that the service will sit down with you, and you'll formulate a plan on how we can get you to where you want to get to. Some of that might involve, for example, we wanted to engage in employment. We'll use an education example. So we'll say, for example, the Daughter of Charity, you're located on the Navan Road, and if you wanted to access the Certificate in Contemporary Living course, people with intellectual disabilities in Trinity, it might be difficult, but can they support to get you there? In other words, can they support you to perhaps access transport independently? If not, are there community-based transports that could get you there? Could they assist you to enroll? So it's while they don't offer that service and it might be difficult, it's how, can we overcome the obstacles to get you there? So that's some of the nuts and bolts of New Direction. As I was saying, if you want to dig into it deeper, and that is a whistle-stop tour, because online, I suppose there's only so much depth you can go into on it, but there is a plethora of information out there for people that want to engage in it. But we'll jump on to some of the supports that are out there. Maybe, people might consider as A, an alternative to a disability service, or B, something they can do in conjunction with their disability service and both to do for part of the week or another time away from that. So we indicated there one of the pieces what that New Directions touches on is employment. Now, let's not pretend this is easy for everybody. It's not. And for people with significant intellectual disabilities, and as I always say, of whom my own son would be one, and I hold the highest of ambition for where he'd go in life. Probably entering the open employment market might be just a step too far for him and maybe some other folks that see it like that. But employment levels are shocking low for people with intellectual disabilities. About 17%. In the general population, that's in the high 60s. So really, really low levels of employment. There is a comprehensive employment strategy there around supporting people, supporting school leavers, all of that. That's this webinar, but look it up. There's really good aspirations in it. There are lots of supported employment pieces out there, such as job coaches, and I'm going to touch on those just slightly now in a second. And one of the biggest barriers has always been with the disability allowance. That's what the DA stands for, and free travel and the medical card and all of that. But there are provisions in place there at the moment. So, for example, if you are taking up employment, you can keep your medical card as long as you're not earning, I think it's around $450 a week or thereabouts. You can keep your free travel card for 3 or 5 years, but you can keep it for a significant period, and you can hold on to some of your disability allowance if your earnings are below a certain threshold, and even if they go over a certain threshold, you'll be able to hold on to the free travel card for a period of time. There are some support, and I would say on the Department of Employment Affairs and Social Protection's website, there is a little tool there. So if you were offered a job at X amount per week, it'll tell you whether it's what financially viable for you to take that up. Look, I just have a little video here, and it shows, I suppose, how some people get really, get really good fulfillment out of work. It just lasts about 2 minutes, and it is also available on the Inclusion Ireland website. So I'll just play this video quickly. Sorry, I accidentally pressed the end, but it was only a couple of seconds ago. There are other videos in relation to that on Inclusion Ireland's website, and there's one or two of them touch on employment there. I know there's a story of a lad with a significant intellectual disability. Look, in terms of North Dublin, and I have some links just at the end of the presentation, employability, really good support. What they do is they help the person get a job, and they pay part of the wage, so it makes it a bit more attractive for the employer. The only thing to say about employability is you need to be job ready. In other words, you've had some job experience under your belt. There's no on-the-job support. So that's maybe for a cohort of folks who would have a relatively mild intellectual disability. Also in North Dublin, there's a number of ability programs out there that, you know, and a lot of these are very short training courses to support people into employment. And they're in the notes, and there's web links to them all, but a couple of them are Blossom, Central Remedial Clinic, Dublin City University. There's a load more on the south side as well. So they're about there. And those programs, they're about empowering people, building skills, and giving them work experiences. Depending on the program, they're all slightly different to each other. So personal budgets, as we're saying, look, personal budgets go back to the VFMs, that stands for the value for money and policy review of disability services. So look, it comes from there, and there was a significant task force that recommended a personal budgets demonstration project. So what is a personal budget? A person with disability controls their own budget and decides their own service. Now, they might need support from a family member to do that, but that's what it boils down to. You know, there are three options. You can have total control of the budget. You can do it through a service broker, of which there are not really any knocking about. So that's maybe a very limited option, or you can do it through a service. So let's say, for example, you got your own budget. We'll say it was 20,000. You can go to the Daughters of Charity and say, I have a budget of 20 grand. I want some support. They might support you, and you provide that 20 grand to them. But essentially, it allows the person to purchase the services that they want. Now, there's demonstration projects at the moment. It's going to be a demonstration project for 180 personal budgets. Just slightly more than half of those are in process. There was to be a second round of offers that got delayed by COVID. But as you can see there in the presentation, when you get the notes, just clicking that, it brings you to the HSE page where you can express an interest if it's something that interests you. You know, it's something that's really, you know, pushing the boundaries for people around control and choice. But it's not for everybody, you know. So if it's something that interests you, that's where you'll get it. Further education. You have to be mindful that, you know, on foot of the Senate case, there's no legal entitlement to education for people after 18. But most people go there. So why shouldn't people with intellectual disabilities? If we look at AHEAD and DARE, they're the two programs. Like DARE is the disability access route into education. They're the two programs for folks to go to higher and further education. They're quite limited for people with intellectual disabilities, because a lot of university courses are set at a very high level, and that's not accessible. Now, that said, there are some small scale projects in Trinity College, DCU, Technical University of Dublin, and right around the country. But there's quite often a cost to attending these. They're not in under the usual SUSI scheme where your fees may be paid. Access officers in all colleges, and sorry, I should say we've got a link to where all of those courses are. It's at the end of the notes. There are access officers in all colleges, and there's a fund for students with disabilities, and that fund can be quite significant depending on your disabilities. You might get somebody that goes to lectures with you to take notes, and that kind of thing. You know, a full-on support person going. So So there are some supports there, but as I was saying, at higher level, definitely in the third level sector, it's limited for folks with intellectual disabilities. Also in further education, youth reach is an option for some folks that are younger. I think it's mainly for the under 24s. And then there's the vocational training opportunity scheme and adult literacy courses. Those are options for folks right the whole way through life. The mainstream access through your local education and training board. And there's a whole plethora of post-leaving cert courses, some of which are offered now at FETAC Level 3, which is more accessible to people with intellectual disabilities. There's apprenticeships, there's all sorts of stuff. And some of it is accessible. Again, it depends on your level of disability a lot of the time. And for a lot of these, there are free books and materials, and you're attending them. So the City of Dublin Education and Training Board, they've got adult guidance officers all around the city. So if you want to get the one particular to your area, just click on the link there and you'll get the one particular to your area, and they'll tell you what's available in the various colleges. I always say to people, look, with the best will in the world, with everything in life, brilliant. There's somewhere in the middle, and there's some stuff that simply doesn't work right at all. So look, if you're ever in a situation where things aren't working right, there is a national advocacy service there for people with disabilities. And when you look on their material, one of the things they can help people with is to ensure their will and preference has been met. To ensure they're been listened to by their service provider, and that they're getting the service that they desire. They've helped people access appropriate day service provision in the past. They've helped them access meaningful, the supports that will help them towards meaningful life in the community if that's what they want. Now, to be mindful, they advocate for the person alone and not the family. So they also do work with adults. So if you've got a 16-year-old who's about to leave school and you're looking to engage the advocacy service, it's over 18s only. And that's the contact details. And there's more details about them online if you were watching. That's basically it on a really, really fast whistle-stop tour of New Directions and some of the supports in the area. There's loads of information at those links around higher and further education, personal budgets, the ability programs are all listed there. And I would say, in terms of it, as we're saying, ability to access those, quite often it depends on the level of a person with disability. And, something that we get reported into, it's quite a lot in Inclusion Ireland, that the greater someone's disability, it sometimes narrow choice around supports. Just saying, these guides here, but I should say that, while it can sometimes narrow the supports, it should never narrow ambition, and always try and aim for the best, and really push the service provider to the limits of what they can do to help achieve your family members' goals and your aspirations for them in life. For lots more information, the National Council for Special Education have lots and lots and lots of guides on their websites. One for simply planning after school, one if you're going down the education and training route, there's the employment route, higher education, and so forth, and one on day services. And I would say my favourite one is the one that's done with the National Disability Authority. It's full of hyperlinks, so that you can go in, and if you see something that interests you, you can click on the hyperlink in the electronic document, and it brings you straight to the website so you can find out more information. You don't necessarily have to go and do all that research. Look, I think that's everything, and I'm very mindful it was a whistle-stop tour of the discussion. But if there are any follow-on questions, my email, there's the Inclusion Ireland phone number. We're also on Facebook. We get lots of queries in through direct messages to the page. We're not fans of answering them on the page itself a lot of the time, because we'd rather answer people's queries. You don't want to airing people's information in public. Message the page. That is the end of a very quick whistle-stop tour of New Directions and some of the supports that are in the North City area. And again, I'd just like to thank the Daughters of Charity for inviting us to have the conversation with you guys here today. Pity we had a technical difficulty at the beginning, but the video will be up afterwards. And once again, just to thank our funders, Government of Ireland, through the schemes, national organisations, and its public ministers. And thank you very much.